Oram, Greg and Richard, right here on Talking Red.
Hello and welcome to Talking Reds, a Nottingham Forest podcast. I'm Greg Oram with my fellow Forest fanatic from across the Atlantic, Richard Spray, and joining us we have Mr. Paul Morley. This one hurts, guys. Not in a dramatic way, not in a shock to the system way, but in that slow, heavy way that settles in your chest and stays there. A 0-0 draw at home to Wolverhampton Wanderers. Not a defeat, but it was a must-win for Forest. Must win to take advantage of the game week and open up a better gap to the bottom three. 90 minutes of pushing, probing, hoping for something to give, and it never did. 35 shots. By the end, all Forest fans needed shots of a different kind to dull the pain. The dust hadn't even started to settle, and in true Marinakis form, Sean Dyche was gone. Another manager out the door at Nottingham Forest. Another moment where you stop and ask what this club is right now and where it's actually heading. There's no joy in talking about someone losing their job, but there's also no escaping the feeling that Forest are stuck in a loop, reacting, not building, lurching from week to week while the league table tightens below us. This wasn't just a draw. It felt like a release valve failing. Today, we're here to talk honestly about what we saw last night and over recent games and weeks and months and why it came to this and what Forest are now clinging to as the season reaches its most unforgiving stretch. We all knew that Dyche craved the Forest job, but for him now, that dream is over.
And the full-time whistle is blown. There was pressure leading into this game for Sean Dyche. They created so much, but they couldn't find a way past Jose Sa and that determined Wolves defensive performance, who actually had the two best chances possibly. The final score, Nottingham Forest 0, Wolverhampton Wanderers 0.
Okay, we're going to start though with the breaking news this morning, and that is that Sean Dyche has become the third manager to be sacked by Nottingham Forest this season following their goalless draw last night with Wolves.
Sad, anyone? I think some are. Some are very, very happy. About Dyche being sacked, that is, and it's been the hot topic of conversation since Leeds, really, on Friday night. The pressure was being ramped up and lots of media outlets were suggesting that his job depended on the Wolves result. It was a 0-0 at home when Forest really needed to capitalise and take all 3 points, and we all know what's happened. I asked the question on the last pod that if Forest can't beat the team in 20th at home, why should anyone believe they're staying up? And that is going to frame this episode as well. Richard and Paul are with me, and there's lots of you in the comments already. I'll quickly go to one or two comments before I bring the guys in. Our good friend Big Arn says, I think we reached a tipping point where the risk of sack is less than or equal to the risk of sticking. Steve says, good afternoon, guys. Well, where do you start today? Well, where indeed? Brucey's with us over in Texas. Yep, maybe we are going to be on the piss with Pereira. We'll talk about that for certain. One or two more of you. Raf is with us in the comments. Says, full roulette now on if we stay up. Next game at Fenerbahce. It's a mad, mad season. Morning to Susan. Pat Brett was very vocal. We know that he never wanted Dyche. He's glad he's gone. He was a bad fit from the start. All right. Go ahead, hit like and subscribe, chaps and chapesses. That would do us a favour. Richard Spray, your instant reaction to all of it.
Not in total disillusion or shock, really. I mean, for me, just because I think it felt like things were trending towards, at least speculatively, that the dressing room wasn't his anymore, and there was some issues with just the way he was training. I mean, I think, Greg, you mentioned a while back that Everton fans had mentioned to you, or you would heard something from someone in that camp that he would just run you to death, and he wouldn't really do anything tactically in training and things of that nature. So I'm not totally shocked by it. There was rumors of him, players being met with and stuff like that, especially players that are more senior and probably have a little bit more cachet in the club. But anyway, I'm probably the opposite of most. I'm not actually that worried. Maybe there's something wrong with me mentally. I don't know. Emotionally, I'm lacking here, but I'm just honestly pretty calm about the situation. I think we'll regroup. I think the players might find freedom and happiness now that maybe they didn't think they had. I don't know, but I tend to have a little bit more positive view. I try to anyway. So I'm taking that route right now rather than just feeling dire and depressed. So, because that certainly wasn't a fun watch yesterday, and I'm glad it's behind us.
It was a frustrating game, Paul, with loads of shots on goal, which we're going to talk about. I mean, the game becomes probably, well, it is definitely the secondary topic now that he's been sacked, but we will talk about the game in the next hour or so as well. And then, of course, the news comes from the club tweeting out, I think it was, I was fast asleep. I mean, I woke up to the news, not surprised. I won't read it out because everyone has seen the X tweet already, but Sean Dyche has been sacked. Tell us what you think, Paul.
Yeah, look, I mean, there's so many different opinions been going around over the last, seems like forever, doesn't it? But I mean, as I've said a few times, I was of the mindset to stick with Dyche for the rest of the season for numerous reasons. But I mean, look, other people have felt differently, and that's fine. Yeah, you've got to respect the decision that's been taken, and I respect other people's opinions who thought differently to me. I think calmness is a good word that Richard used there. I think partly that's maybe feeling a bit of calmness because we've got 10 days until our next league game, so it feels like. And I know 10 days is obviously not a long time, but if we'd have had another game coming up on Saturday or Sunday, and it would have felt a little bit hectic, and whoever's coming in's got to, not going to have any time with the players. I know we've got Fenerbahce, and I hate to say it because that almost feels very secondary now, given what's going on in the league, but which is not where I wanted us to be about Europe, but it feels that way. But it's also a chance, having said that, for somebody to come in, as long as we all view that match in the same way, that actually it's a bit of a free hit for whoever comes in newly, just to have a look at people for 90 minutes, see what they produce. The players hopefully will be up for it before a new manager, and that carries on into the Liverpool game. So yeah, lots of conflicting emotions. I think. I mean, one thing that I wasn't enjoying at all was the constant sort of bickering amongst fans, and as much as I was in one camp and other people were in another. We all want the same thing for Forest. We want Forest to do well, and none of us want Forest to go down. We have different opinions about how we should have gone about doing that. But one thing I hope that this does do is kind of hopefully closes a chapter on that sort of bit of toxicity now, and everybody can kind of come together again, because we need that. We need what we can see what they've got at Leeds. In terms of the unity behind the players and the team and the manager, we need an injection of that, and that is definitely one thing that I guess always counted against some of my arguments that we should stick with Dyche purely from a footballing perspective. But there's more to it. There's the off the pitch sort of discontent that as long as that went on, and long as that was sort of bubbling away under the surface, even after a few decent results, it was always going to come back every time we lost. So you kind of think, see, maybe that wasn't sustainable. And again, whether you should run a football club on the emotion of your fans is another question. But we know that Marinakis does tend to do that. So we are where we are, and as Richard said, we just got to sort of dust ourselves down and hope that whoever does come in next, I'm sure we'll talk about a few different options. Like I say, we all get behind and we can together pull the team over the line.
It does feel like that with Marinakis, that he kind of puts his finger in his mouth and holds it to the wind to kind of see and test the temperature of the fan base. The players as well seem to have had a big say. It was widely reported that 5 or so senior players were brought up to the boardroom to effectively probably stab Sean Dyche in the back, potentially, because it seems like they weren't having him. Apparently he's lost the dressing room. So that was a conversation that we were having between us in our group about what kind of dressing room is it going to be at the moment. It seems that coming out and nailing him after Wrexham went down really badly. And some of the other things he said as well has started to kind of change the direction of some of the thought processes of the players. I mean, the players, this is a question that I'll put into the mix. Does the modern player have too much power? Is that player power at at its finest. I mean, they did the same to Ange Postecoglou, potentially. I think they had the same debate with the owner when Ange was up against it, and that was 8 games worth. So it's a huge risk. It's a huge, huge risk. And it does look like that Forest are turning to Vitor Pereira. Everyone will know that they are now in talks with the ex-Wolves manager. He has been identified as a very strong candidate option after the sacking of Sean Dyche. Those of you that need reminding, he took over from Wolves, I think it was December 24. Wolves were bottom 3, struggling, going down, and he came in and saved them, went on a really good run of wins, got a Manager of the Month award in the mix as well, and got the points to keep them up, and they all fell in love with the guy. It was a very different story at the start of this season when Wolves started the campaign so badly, albeit they had been stripped of pretty much all their best players. He couldn't get a win in 10 games. I think he lost most of them, or nearly all of them, and he was shown the door. And we know that Wolves are in a really bad situation. So instant reaction to Vitor Pereira, Richard, being an option for Forest. He looks like the guy. I think we're going to call that he's going to be the guy.
Yeah, I mean, at first pass, you go, well, is it really advisable to hire a sacked manager that, obviously had them in this position where they are now, or at least contributed to it by not being able to keep wins coming in or points coming in? Yeah, that doesn't track from an optic standpoint or statistic standpoint, but at the same time, it wasn't exactly the same situation, but West Ham certainly had a lot of faith in bringing in Nuno, and I think he's rewarded them with that. I think, looking at last season, I kind of just checked where they were at week 25 last season, and they were at 19 points, and they ended on 42. So, I mean, I'm sure that's being part of the process in Marinakis' mind is like, he probably plays a brand of football. He has a personality that he's probably familiar with and feels like can really connect with the guys in the dressing room and really create that. And as far as your question regarding if players have too much power, sure, but that's all sports really, to be honest with you, because they're the assets. And when you're a businessman, you want to keep your assets strong, right? And flourishing. And so I think, as much as I do think you're right about the finger in the wind scenario with Marinakis, I also, you can kind of almost in a way honor that as a fan base, because you feel like he's invested in what we want to see on the pitch, and that includes listening to the players when they're just not happy, and it is hard. I've been, Greg, personally offline, I've struggled with a leader that came into us who was this guy that just didn't seemingly connect with anyone, and it created a lot of toxicity. So I'm not saying Dyche is that level of person, but he certainly has set his ways, and I think that was evident sometimes in terms of what you saw on the pitch as well. So
my thoughts going back to Dyche, I want your view on Pereira as well, Paul. His in-game management, I thought, was really becoming a problem. As much as I was advocating for keeping Dyche, and I can't rewrite history and say anything different, because I said I think it would be suicidal, and I'm going to say it here and now. Clip this up, everyone. I believe Nottingham Forest are getting relegated. I believe that the sacking of Sean Dyche and the risk factor and the historical data and comparisons with other clubs that have sacked managers this late in the season all points to Nottingham Forest getting sacked. I don't want that. Getting sacked, getting relegated. I don't want that, by the way. I don't want that. But that's what I think is going to happen. Please come back and laugh at me, ridicule me, joke at me, order me to do silly things when we stay up, because that's what I want. But that's my thoughts and feelings now. The in-game management, as much as I wanted Dyche to stay, was really frustrating for me. His inability to change things in a game, especially last night when we needed the goal. Go and read WT analysis on X. He lays it all out. He's so good at laying it all out. Go and find Will, WT analysis on X, and he will lay it all out perfectly for you. And he talks about moving Sangare or taking him off. Ola Aina looked gassed. Why wasn't Nets brought on? Why didn't we go to 2 up top with Taiwo? Because it's just baffling, Paul. Colin talks about better in-game tactics and stuff like that. Vitor Pereira coming in favours, we think, the 3-4-3. I mean, I've just chucked a load of information at you, Paul. You can chuck some words back at me now.
Yeah, I think the in-game stuff is interesting, isn't it? I mean, I guess more for me, it's kind of like the some of the players that he seemed to really be reluctant to use. I mean, somebody, I can't remember who it was, somebody put something out on X this morning about how following the Ferencváros game, McAtee had a really good game. He scores that goal. The squad are all around him. Obviously confidence is up, and then he we don't see him again. Similarly with Taiwo. I mean, again, loads of people would say Taiwo's kind of finished, and it was a bit of a lucky sort of cameo that he did. But nonetheless, if you're going to be in games where you need to use players, then let's go to these players.
On the bench, then he's got to be an option, surely.
Yeah, exactly, and it's the reluctance to, once players have gone and done something good, and then just to not use them. How put yourself in particularly McAtee's shoes after that game. You think, well, how are you going to be feeling? Confidence has gone up there, and all of a sudden it's back down again. So, that side of it was an issue, I think. And again, look, we don't know what goes on in the training ground. We don't know what sort of conversations go on behind closed doors. But clearly, obviously something wasn't right behind the scenes. And I think, I said this morning on X, I think the way what makes me a little bit sort of, I don't say nervous, but just kind of, and it's really difficult because we're obviously emotionally attached to Forest, and we've been going through this in our own minds and our own heads for weeks on end. I think if you're looking from the outside in, and I don't know if anyone's watched Match of the Day, and whether you like Danny Murphy and Alan Shearer or not, but they're respected football pundits. They know the game. They've been in and around the league and all that sort of stuff. And I think their sentiments were, which I think a lot of West Ham and Leeds fans will be waking up this morning thinking, why have they done that? And it feels sort of reckless. They've got a guy who knows how to navigate this end of the table. He's done it time and again. And we're not in the relegation zone. I point to the fact that yes, West Ham and Leeds have picked up, but we went into the game against West Ham 6 games ago, 4 points ahead of them. They've had their best run of the season. We're now 3 points ahead of them. So despite all the massive uptick in form, they've actually only gained 1 point in us in 6 games. Leeds, in fact, I think we've caught them up over that 6-game period. They were 4 ahead of us. They're now 2 ahead of us. So, there's loads of things that make you think from the outside, it's a bit of a reckless decision. And again, if I was Leeds or West Ham this morning waking up, I'd be thinking, God, this lot are an absolute panicked mess. They're there for the taking. So that was, and again, that was part of my sort of reservation about making this change. Is what message does it send? A, as I said, to those around us, but B, also to whether it's Pereira or somebody else. I think Pereira probably is not going to be too put off by it. I think he's worked for Marinakis before. He's probably not looking for a long-term job. So I think Dan said on Twitter recently that he ticks quite a lot of boxes in that case. But if you're looking beyond Pereira and we're looking at the summer, if we're assuming that he is coming in as this sort of short-term, get us through to the end of the season kind of guy, you start to sort of ask questions about who else would be put off by coming into work in this environment where you're burning through managers like nobody's business, and particularly for someone like Dyche, who came in with a specific remit to get us out of the relegation zone and keep us up. And he will argue, rightly or wrongly, well, I would say rightly, that, hang on a minute, I came in, you were in the bottom 3, I've got you out of it, I've kept you out of it, and that's not good enough. And if you think somebody else can do better, then good luck to you. But I think if we get relegated, I don't think it's on Dyche. I think he's kind of, he's done his part of the bargain. And I think that's why it's such a huge risk for Marinakis. I know we've talked about this, Greg, earlier on, and I agree with you. I don't think Marinakis could be too, bothered what people think of him. But if we'd have gone down under Dyche, then he could have, Marinakis could point to, look, I gave this guy 30 games to get the house in order. He failed to do it. That sort of, he's no longer got that shield, if you like. Everything, if we go down, I don't know, Edu, Marinakis, but it's on them. I think it's not on. If we go down under Pereira, he'll point to the fact he came in. He's got 12 games to sort of try and keep us up, and that's not long enough. And Andrew will say he only had 5 games, and Nuno only had 3, and all the rest of it. So it comes back to the guys at the top. I think if this goes wrong, they are the ones that have to carry the can.
The thing is, Forest do things a certain way, and whilst Marinakis has been in charge of the club and owned the club, it's been the Marinakis way, and we know how trigger happy he has been. We haven't really seen it in this full glory up until obviously this season, and it's been a mistake after a mistake potentially. I mean, the comments are interesting. Everyone's got their opinion. Pat talks about we were going down with Dyche. You don't know that. It's your opinion. Fair enough. That's an opinion, not a fact. The record that Paul has talked about quite extensively of points per game and trends have us trending towards a points total that keeps us safe. 13 more points needed to get to 40. I believe Dyche would have done that. I think 40 points would have been the magic figure. 1 second, Rich, I'm going to bring you in.
Yeah.
That's what I believe. But at the same time, he's gone now. So now we have to look at the next guy coming in and the new manager bounce that we've been talking about and seeing, and whether or not the guy coming in can harness that new manager bounce. And when we say new manager bounce, we mean getting his principles down and across to this group of players. They are a set of players, Richard, that have had to work with Nuno for a very short period of time, although most of them last season. I'm on about the new ones. Then they all switched to Ange, and that we know about. Then they have Dyche for, 4 months, 25 games. I mean, does it matter that we're going to another manager now, particularly, or it's like we are where we are? And Vitor Pereira, he's shown it at Wolves that time he came in. That I think one of you just said they were on 19 points and got to 40 odd points. How hopeful are you that he can do the same for us?
I think that's why I am a bit more calm. And when we talk about bringing him in, it doesn't concern me significantly because you just pointed it out. What is his actual points per game total that he has to get? I think if we were in bottom 3 right now and we were at 19 points, even though he did that last season, the reality is that looks very dire, right? That looks like almost an impossibility. But by virtue of the fact that, like Paul keep pointing out, Dyche did his job in the sense that he got the points per game total up significantly. I think it was over a point more than Ange was achieving when he was here. So he did what he needed to do. But there's a certain tipping point, right, where things can really start to spiral. And clearly, it felt like that tipping point had been reached for Marinakis from all the feedback he was getting. But I will say that makes me feel more hopeful that we don't get relegated, because I don't think what Pereira has to do is as monumentally challenging as what I think Dyche had to deal with when he came in and what Pereira had to deal with last season. And I think he does have talent at his disposal. I think he's going to be... Hopefully, I mean, you see what Wolves let go. I mean, just in this transfer window, but even prior to that, I mean, their talismanic figure in Cunha was gone. The guy who created almost everything for that team in terms of offensive attack. So there's a lot that he lost. I mean, so how much do you really put on him for that sort of downturn, significant downturn, and so forth? But that's why I feel like, and I think it was Gerard Miller in the comments who said, this is why I go. Everyone keeps talking about, 4 managers and this, that. We always talk about bucking the trend in relation to how Forest operates. It would not shock me that we are the one team that doesn't go follow the statistics and be that team that gets relegated by putting a manager in February. So a new manager rather. So that's why I think I'm adding all these ingredients up in my mind. Maybe I'm just telling myself a story to, pacify my own concerns. But I do feel calm because I think Pereira just doesn't have the same mountain to climb that he did last season.
Adam thinks we need a quick fix motivator for 12 games. Going for Pereira will be another big mistake. Richard says, setting your stall out for player power, they have to take responsibility along with the manager, but they're not being held to account. How much is it on the players then? I mean, I think that's something I'm thinking. I think that these players are top level pros. And last night we saw shots from stupid places with low XG outcomes. There was panic setting in. It was rush football. I do believe that the manager has to take responsibility for as I said, the in-game management and the changing of things as well. But we've seen this all season, haven't we? Where, I mean, we had it under Ange. When we dominated play, we were playing in a different way. We just couldn't put the ball in the back of the net, Paul. It can't all be, well, we haven't got Chris Wood. I mean, that's just too much of an easy thing to say, isn't it? I mean, these players...
Is it?
No, I think it's fact.
I mean, listen, I know he scored last season, but we had other players putting the ball in the back of the net. I mean, some of the big chances we've created this season in Europe and in the Premier League that haven't gone in, and Chris Wood was responsible for one of them when we played at home to Sunderland. How he missed that header, I'll never know. It was almost like someone sprinkled the anti-magic dust over Nottingham Forest, the non-scoring dust. It's crazy. Last night was absolutely bonkers. How, think of it this way. Had we scored 2 or 3 that we should have done, Dyche wouldn't have been sacked. We'd be having a completely different conversation. So there's people out there say, well, actually, I'm quite glad that we drew because he's going to be sacked now. I just don't get that because none of us know what's going to happen. I want to quickly put this on as well from Henry Winter, who I respect and many do as well. talking about Nottingham Forest sacking Sean Dyche. He's been nominated for Manager of the Month for January. His last 6 Premier League games, 2 wins, 3 draws, 1 loss. On the face of it, that's not too bad. The Wolves draw was undeniably poor. We know that. No goals from 35 attempts, terrible. But Forest's best finisher is 34 and been injured since October. So he's bringing in the wood factor. When you're on your 4th manager of the season, the problem might not simply be them. It might also be you. Recruitment, culture, and the right leadership from owner and sporting director. Marinakis has done a lot for Forest, but he's embarrassing them now. Edu, also an issue. Forest fans deserve better than this poor leadership. Edu hasn't been mentioned yet. Is he a massive part of this problem? Everyone, a lot of people are pointing towards Edu's arrival being the turning point. Paul Morley.
Well, yeah, I mean, it seemed to set off a chain reaction of events, doesn't it, that have led to here. I mean, you can trace it all back pretty much. I mean, obviously, we weren't in the boardroom. We don't know what the discussions were, but, Nuno signs a new contract. Everything seems rosy. That was after Edu came in, I think. But so maybe at that point, they hadn't really kind of spent much time together. But soon as obviously that relationship started to form, it was obviously forming on the wrong foot, and like I say, that's been the catalyst to what's happened since, and it's just been a crazy sort of period of time. And come back to your thing about the players and them taking responsibility. I think, I mean, yeah, they have to. I mean, I think I know I've said this for a while. I think this inconsistency of performance that we've seen in the last few weeks, it's not a Dyche thing. It's not just happened in Sean Dyche's tenure. I think it goes back to over a year. I said this the other day, that we had that purple patch in the middle of last season where everything was clicking. We won 6 games in a row. We then drew with Liverpool. We then almost the Southampton game at home was where it all started to sort of go a little bit weird, in that we were brilliant in the first half, atrocious in the second half, clung on to win 3-2, and then it all started to we started to see this inconsistency bed in that the following week we got smashed by Bournemouth 5-0, and then we turned up and beat Brighton 7-0. So big yo-yo, big swings, and we had games like City at home, which was great, and United at home and Spurs away, where we had really good wins. And then we had the converse of that. We had the first half at Newcastle, where they were awful, conceding 4 goals in 10 minutes. And then we had the start at Villa, where we just were completely blown away. And again, second half of that looked like a different team. We had Everton at home, where we were woeful. We had Leicester at home, we were woeful. We saw that at the start of this season, brilliant against Brentford, woeful against West Ham. So this whole yo-yo thing has been going on for a long period of time. And I think that's when it comes to, when you talk about the players. I really like Morgan Gibbs-White. He's been one of the Forest's best players for the last 3 or 4 years. He wears his heart on his sleeve, but he is everything sort of, he's the bellwether, as Richard would know that word from it's kind of a states phrase in terms of, which direction is something going in. If Morgan's playing well, generally the team plays well. And when he's brilliant, he's really, really good. But when he's bad, he's atrocious. He's really poor. And I think that kind of, and it's not just him. I think that, as I say, it runs through the team. I think that's arguably why these players, who are incredibly talented players, that's kind of why they're playing for Forest and not playing for an Arsenal and Man City, because they just don't. They're not able to consistently string it together week after week after week. Yes, we saw it for a 6-week period last season, but other than that, for the last 2 or 3 years, we've been this inconsistent group of footballers, and it's largely the same group. We've tried to add young players to it this year, and they've sort of been caught up in it as well. As we talked about McAtee earlier, he's had some stinkers and he's had some good moments. So it's just a whole environment of feels like trying to. And coming back to what Henry Winter was saying, trying to strive for arguably too much too quickly. And we talked about that again at the beginning of this season, which is where the whole Edu thing came in. I guess if you think when it was announced that Edu was coming to Forest, I think we were all like, oh, quacky, that it's a really good sign of intent. Done well at Arsenal. So apparently we didn't know huge amounts about him, but I think we were quite content with that approach. But it's what then led to Nuno being dismissed, and this drive and desire for probably too much too quickly, which is sort of now coming back to bite us. So I don't know if I answered your question there, but a bit long-winded. I just want to say one thing before I end back, and I think Richard Ottaway this is where he highlights the risk of what we're doing brilliantly in the post, where he mentions about when Leicester sacked Cooper. Now, we were all looking at that from the outside,
Quick word for Stu Freestone, the cheese trader, our sponsor. He is based in York, as you all know. All of the information is on screen. It's also in the bio to this episode. So please go ahead and put your order in to the Cheese Trader. You can get 10% off when you order via email, phone, or Instagram, and you quote Talking Reds. That inconsistency is a word that I've used, Richard, quite a lot. And is it any surprise when you look at this graphic? Forest so far this season have had 3 managers. For those that can't see it, it's on screen and it shows Nuno and Ange and Sean Dyche. Of course, Ange in the middle with a 0% win record because he lost 8 or didn't win a game in 8, I should say. Nuno for 3 games had a 33%. So that's 1 win out of 3. But the larger portion of games, of course, Sean Dyche, 25 games, a 40% win ratio. That's all competitions as well. But when it comes to having the 3 managers now 4th, and we talk about the inconsistencies and the players having to take responsibility, in fairness to the players, I mean, they've had many messages thrown at them this season. Play this way, play that way, defend from that line. No, do it from the edge of the box. No, you sit deeper, you go along. No, your wingers are changing left, right, and centre. McAtee, who I know you want to talk about, doesn't get a look in. And Paul mentioned it, and I saw it. He has a man-of-the-match performance against Ferencvaros. I know they're weaker position, but it felt like he'd arrived in a Forest shirt. So we're talking about Dyche now. We know about the new manager coming in, probably going to be Vitor Pereira. We're thinking about the inconsistencies over the course of the season. Yes, the players get a little bit of a kind of acknowledgement that they've had a lot to deal with. But the spotlight now is back on Sean Dyche and the decision to sack him. You live and die by your decisions as a manager. And his decision to not give James McAtee an absolute chance in this Forest team, I think, on reflection, has been a bit of a mistake. What do you think, Richard?
No, I agree. I mean, I called for him to come in against Leeds. I thought that you play the hot hand. You when you look at how Leeds set up, you wanted to try to find a way to carve them up because they were frail when it comes to through balls and ways to get around them versus being more direct and trying to play over them and trying to, hit the ball, upwards from, and try to pelt them with crosses. That just was never going to be a good mechanism for trying to break them open. So I think kind of similar with Wolves last night in the sense that they were just going to continue to play that low block. They're going to continue to try to withstand the pressure. I mean, we were just on it from the minute 1 in terms of the intensity and the purpose of what we were trying to do. But there was just no way through in that box. And so when that doesn't happen, what do you need? You need someone who's a bit more surgical, who's used to being told how to play in tight spaces and trying to find those little creases to carve someone open. So why wasn't that utilized? And I think that's the key. Paul mentioned just this propensity. I mean, some of it's just tactically, probably a little bit inflexible, but I think it was also inflexible in terms of what players to use because he just didn't favor those players. He didn't see them as his guys. And so by virtue of that, he just never seemingly used those tools. But when you got these tools, I mean, when you're trying to cut something quickly, you don't use a hammer. you use a saw. So it's like, just try to be a little bit more, I think, open to what needs to happen. He seemed to indicate at the beginning, because that was the problem we had with Ange as well. I mean, amongst a number of things, but the inflexibility and sticking with what he thought needed to happen at every moment. And then when it didn't go well, then he blamed the players. And it's like, well, maybe you're just not utilizing to their strengths. Maybe you're not creating a framework that actually maximizes their talent. And so that's a problem. And I think Kevin Andrews I've heard that's kind of what he does at Brentford. He tries to not just focus exclusively on a way of doing things. He allows some flexibility for allowing his players to thrive based off of who they are and how they function. I mean, I understand these are all professional footballers. You should be able to adapt as well, but I just think that was really a frustration for me. I mean, I think bringing Jesus last night, okay, it wasn't working with Luca. That makes sense. But I think Taiwo was probably a good option. You had said that, Greg, I think in the comments in our WhatsApp group. But I just thought it begged for James McAtee, because Morgan was crashing the box and taking ownership of trying to score goals. You didn't have someone between the 18-yard box and the deeper position where Anderson was just pelting beautiful balls, switching a play across the field with absolute precision. You had somebody trying to create windows of opportunity from a deeper role. You had nobody in between to do anything different. And he just kept going with it. And that was the part I don't understand. And that's the part that always frustrated me with him, is he just never seemed to shift, right? We always joked plan B is just throw a bunch of damn crosses into the box and hope that it goes in. That seemed to be his only option. So yeah, I think that's partly why I'm not sitting here, crying over the fact that he's gone, simply because I feel like we're in a decent position in terms of where we are from a point standpoint, and we just need someone to kind of tip the scales a little bit to allow the players to have more freedom and show more flexibility through the process when it's not going well on the pitch.
So I'm talking about and thinking about decisions, and as much as I wanted Sean Dyche to stay, because I think that gave us the best chance, I'm not blinded by the faults and failures of Sean Dyche. The performances, certainly against Everton and away at Fulham and Leeds, obviously, and last night, leave a lot to be desired. I mean, I talk about last night, and we had so much of the ball, it's ridiculous. I think there was a stat that you might have shared with us, Richard, that said, I think in the 10 games that Sean Dyche has been a Premier League manager, where he's had more than 60% possession.
61%, yeah.
They've never won any of those games. The big one for me recently that made me turn was, as 3-Star Reds points out, Luca Net's 100 appearances in the Bundesliga, but Dyche doesn't play him in the cauldron of Ellen Road and throws a young academy player into the mix. He talks about McAtee being ignored as well, and Igor Jesus, 11 goals, no start. That might have been in relation to last night not getting started, because he has started. But the Luca Net's decision for me was just crazy. I don't know why he throws Zach Abbott in and what you're expecting. He was making decisions that I just couldn't get behind. But then we go back to last night, guys, and we have this situation where Forest flood forwards and are on the break and literally probably got in each other's way. And I want to talk about now the new signing, Lorenzo Luca. We were all hoodwinked on Friday night when he came off the bench and scored that goal that made us think, you know what, actually salvation has arrived. It's not in the form of Igor Jesus that salvation's arriving. It's the Italian pizza crouch, Lorenzo Luca. All we need is Omari Hutchinson and Hudson-Odoi and others to just serve it on a plate. He will glide in and he will nod balls into the net and we will be redeemed. But no, I don't think I've seen a donkey at the City ground, a bigger donkey, I should say, than what I saw last night. I think he's absolutely terrible. Absolutely terrible. He has got no mobility. His ability to find space in the box and glide into dangerous areas and get amongst those centre-backs was non-existent. The way that he scarred that shot over, I thought, was appalling. He ran onto it. There were others there that should have slotted it in. It was appalling. He looked terrible. The players didn't even want to pass to him at the end because they probably saw him on the training ground and thought, what on earth is going on? And that goes down to recruitment as well. There's reports that Dyche wanted X, Y, and Z player and didn't get them. And we go back to the recruitment, Paul Morley, of Edu getting his fingers into the pie, because it smacks of an Edu signing this again. So I throw it back at you. Your thoughts on Lorenzo Luca, please, because I'm not going to hold back. I thought he was absolutely woeful last night. And I called for him to start because I was hoodwinked. I thought this is the guy that's going to get us goals. Every time the crosses went in, they weren't great, to be fair, but he didn't get anywhere near them. And in fact, when the ball came near, he said he's trying to chest it or something. And he's missing the ball. He was absolutely dreadful. Am I wrong, Paul?
No, he wasn't very good last night. I'm pretty sure I said on here or somewhere a few weeks ago when we signed him that we shouldn't pin our hopes on this guy because he hasn't played a huge amount of football this season. He did all right last season in Italy. Different ball game coming over here and playing the Premier League. So look, he was put in the team. He looked all right for 5 minutes last week, but do you pick somebody after 5 minutes? They've got their head on the cross, and he did well at Leeds. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I had lower expectations of him than you did. So I wasn't necessarily. Obviously, I was disappointed that particularly with that particular chance, he didn't make more of it. But I don't know what you expect someone to come in and transform the team in the top of the pitch that have been struggling to score all season when he's got a record of whatever it was, 1 in 19 games a season. So, I didn't necessarily think he was the answer. I think Igor Jesus, has been a bit unlucky with the number of goals that he has or hasn't scored this season. We've seen him have a couple chalked off that particularly one at Liverpool that shouldn't have been. And, I think we probably see him in the next game, although, again, new manager might have different ideas again. So who knows? Yeah, Luca wasn't great. I don't think he's going to be the saviour or not between now and the end of the season. The only thing I would say, just to give him a little bit of slack and in making a comparison with the first probably 2 or 3 games that we saw Chris Wood, we all pretty much said what you just said about Luca. No mobility, didn't look sharp, all that sort of stuff. And obviously we know what happened. So, maybe there's a player in there that over time, with a bit more minutes, he could sharpen up and look better. But yeah, from the evidence last night, he's not going to be the saviour if we do stay up.
Opta on X said that Forest had 35 shots without scoring last night. We know that. It's the most shots without scoring a goal by any team in the Premier League since Man United v Burnley in October 2016. And we can look at a few more of the data points from last night as well. 10 shots on target out of 35. We had 63% possession versus their 37%. The XG, and a lot of people are not in the camp of XG. Some like it. I mean, out of those 35 shots, 10 on target, they're quoting a 2.71 XG. So that means we should have scored nearly 3 goals. And I think the eye test proves that potentially as well. When we look at the Morgan Gibbs-White header in the first half, we look at Callum Hudson-Odoi passing shots into the midriff of the goalkeeper. We look at Lorenzo Luca skying it over the bar. Morato's shot that, he was a good save from the keeper, but on another day flies in the net, as well as countless others as well. And then we look also on screen at the first half and second half as well, and how the XG chart stacks up. Richard Spray, I know you like your stats and so on. Do you despair when you look at things like that and you see things like that? And how much hope does it give you that the new guy coming in has got plenty to work with? We can create chances.
Yeah, I think it gives me hope. Like I said, I think there's talent there. We've long said that. In regards to Jesus, real quick, that's what I find funny is that, I understand we live in the age of technology that gives you instant gratification. So, but not every one of these players is Erling Haaland. I mean, what makes a player elite is how quickly they can become great and adapt and fit in and slot right in. But not all these players are iPhones, guys. They don't just come out the box working brilliantly from the first second. So we tend to be, to Paul's point, a bit too punitive too quickly. I mean, I understand what you're saying about Luca. I started him because it gave us a different look and it seemed like he had a little bit of mojo going. So in that sense, Dyche actually did go with the guy with mojo. But I do find it funny that and ironic that last season we played above our XG consistently, and this season we constantly play below it. And I think I know we've already said it, But the two key factors in that is Alanga's not here and Wood isn't here. And so the presence of elite skill sets is missing. It's too many players that potentially have the opportunity to become phenomenal strikers or other areas of the pitch over time. But it's just this unfortunate chemistry that we have of all these players who haven't played in the Premier League enough that are kind of the ones that we're fixating on. And so it is unfortunate, but in terms of stats, I just always found that really ironic. And it was amazing that the two guys who probably were emblematic of how terrible it was last season was Luca skying it over the bar and Dan Ndoye trying to do a bicycle kick with a few minutes left in the match. And those two guys both were lauded because in their first games, they both got goals and they have done nothing outside of that. Granted, Luca very little time logged at this stage, but yeah, he looked. That's why I think everyone fixates. Well, Jesus doesn't this and he doesn't do that. The guy plays, with maximum effort every second, and he's got way more physicality than people give him credit for. He's got more athleticism than they give him credit for. He holds the ball up and he does link up play very well, right? He hasn't been lucky, but we also have to say, where's Morgan's magic wand of a foot that's been delivering those balls in the box to him? It's been non-existent. Where else is it coming from? I mean, Elliott's been great, but he's been asked to play a lot deeper. And when he does get close to the box, he tends to kind of get stuck there. So there's just a lot that's lacking to feed him enough, I think. And we just kind of ignore that part of it. It's just unfortunate. So lesson learned, you know what? The things you complain that are not there, there's a whole lot of things that he does do well that the other guys may not. So it's just a good cautionary tale for us not to treat every player like an iPhone and the next best thing. Like Mark Turner always says, you always think the guy on the bench is the next best thing that can turn the tides. Well,
we want to think about our squad and we want to think about the players that can come on and affect the game. And when you look at the bench options last night, I mean, Taiwo was still in the squad. We think that he wasn't going to be in the original squad at the start of the season, but then Aina gets injured and Taiwo gets added. And we don't think we're going to see Taiwo again in a Forest shirt. He gets a little bit of a renaissance under Ange and came back into the side, and then he's kind of hung around since, and he had that moment against Brentford. And I was there. It was fantastic. It was one of my favourite moments as an away fan ever in a ground to see Taiwo score a goal like that. So if he can do it and he's fit and he's away at Brentford and we know his attributes, why the F? Try not to swear in it these days, guys. I always drop F-bombs, but I've been told by my wife to stop doing it, so I'm going to try doing it. But why the F was he not brought on last night? I mean, I know that Luca goes off and Jesus comes on fine, but then there was no kind of like real anxiety or
against Palace too. I mean, you called for him then too.
Yeah, but for these players to score last night, go two up top, make the change that you were talking about, bringing McAtee on. I mean, if you read the Daily Mail today, it's baffling to me that he's put Jer Cunha in the Europa squad because according to them, Sean Dyche didn't rate Jer Cunha or Bakwa, which is why Bakwa's being the invisible man. I mean, Jer Cunha was on the bench last night. We've all been crying out for him. So I guess one thing I am hopeful about is that whoever comes in and we think is Vitor Pereira, Paul, that we hope it's a clean slate now for McAtee, for Jer Cunha, for these players that he might look at them and go, you know what, actually, you're my cup of tea. And we might see a manager, as someone in the comments said it earlier, it's too late for tactics. I don't think it is too late for tactics. If it's too late for tactics, then you keep Sean Dyche. Because ultimately, you know, the change that you've got to hope for is that the guy coming in is going to get the best out of these players by fine-tuning it and just altering it and just making adjustments. So, you know, who for you now do you feel, Paul, out of our current squad might benefit the most out of the new manager? You don't know, of course, but who do you hope?
I don't know. I mean, again, if it is Pereira, then I think, you know, obviously there's been a few comments about obviously he speaks Portuguese. We know how well that worked last year with some of the Brazilian lads. And you've obviously got Jer Cunha that you just mentioned there. Obviously Jesus that we talked about. You'd imagine if it is Pereira that those guys will warm to him. He'll have a connection with them. I'm just trying to think about what he did at Wolves. You mentioned he played 3-4-3 last season. Whether we'll move to that, it'll be interesting to see. I honestly don't know. I think whoever it is that comes in just needs to. I think you're right. Clean slate is definitely the right phrase. And if they're in the next 24 hours, they've got a week to assess, which I think is important. I think that's probably why he's made the change now. It'd be interesting if we were still in the FA Cup and we had a cup game at the weekend, whether he would have made this change. Probably still would have done, but the fact that we haven't, I think, is again coming back. Everyone talks about the Wrexham game and how that was a bit of a catalyst because Dyche had a go at some of the fringe players in that game. As a result of losing that game, we've now got this break. Enforced break, which actually might end up being a blessing in disguise for whoever comes in because they've got a week on the training ground. So, in a perverse sort of way, that Wrexham car crash might end up sort of being a good thing for us. I don't know. I just hope that whoever it is can get them going and that they will each feel that they've now got a stake back in the sort of the season again. Almost is that there's some of those players you mentioned, Tyrone McAtee, might have just been sort of thinking, God, I'm not really going to get any chances between now and the end of the season. So their motivation's down. If somebody suddenly comes in, everybody's got a clean slate, like you say. They all feel like they've got a stake in it again, and they can, hopefully start turning up and showing what they've got in training and giving him some difficult decisions to make.
Hutch certainly benefited from Dyche coming in because he was given a chance. One thing that we all thought would change to the better with Sean Dyche coming in fact, the club told us that it would be changing, is set pieces. And I've got to be honest with you. I mean, our defending of set pieces, I don't know if it improved. It hasn't been so much a talking point lately about conceding from set pieces. There's still a problem there. I think we maybe have just become a little bit better at it. But our set pieces that we take have got to be amongst the worst. I mean, I've seen Sunday league men's football. I've seen Saturday afternoon kids football corners delivered better. I mean, Hutch last night, 2 in a row going out. I mean, you saw the look on his face. He knew full well it was dreadful. But that can't happen, can it? And Anderson on the set pieces was just as bad as everybody else. What on earth, Richard, is going on? We have to hope. And is there a set piece coach at the club? It doesn't look like it. I mean, it's one area that Arsenal have proven and other clubs have proven that you should be capitalising on and scoring goals from, etc., etc. And we just look like we've got more chance of flying to the moon and back.
Well, I was not to keep pressing on this issue, but I would also say that's another reason to bring
I'm getting
McAtee
very
in.
animated today.
No, it's all good. I love it. I think that's another reason to consider McAtee coming in as well, because he can do things of that nature as whenever you're just not able to operate in the box with any efficiency, then maybe what you need is a little cutting edge other areas, and so bringing in someone who can do that. Because to your point, I mean, Hutch, 1 out of every 4 or 5 looks reasonably threatening. But to Paul's point earlier about the inconsistency, I think it was Dan that had said this. When you look at the set piece trajectory in terms of what we were dealing with and how poorly we were managing that last season under Nuno as well, it happened after that game against Liverpool where we drew. You could see the data seemed to show like this downward turn of our effectiveness in relation to that. And when we look at Milenkovic had 5 goals last season, not even sniffed a goal this season, and a majority of those came from set pieces. And ironically, I think there was at least 2 assists off set pieces that Anderson delivered to Milenkovic last season. So there's definitely something that hasn't, as you pointed out, has it been a little bit better defensively? Yeah. I mean, a lot of that has to do with getting your full back line back, having that synergy that exists with them. It's what made us great at the beginning of last season. But we also did a great job defending all of that in that stretch where we were really winning games as well. Like we said, Greg, coming into the podcast when we started talking Reds, if we could just get, 10% better or 30% better or whatever it was, I can't remember now. It creates a huge difference in terms of where we land in the table. That season under that Nuno came in, when Cooper got sacked. So in any case, yeah, it continued to be something that we're not taking advantage of on the offensive side of it. We don't seem to have as much of an issue on the defensive side with the same level of concern. But being able to take advantage of those moments, to your point about Arsenal, I mean, that's what makes them Saliba and Gabriel. I mean, it's amazing what that can do for you. Just getting that one goal that you just don't expect and doing it from a set piece, how much that changes the trajectory of a match. match and creates pressure for the opposing team. And we just haven't been able to do that. I don't know what it is. Hopefully Pereira, maybe that's part of the equation. I've never looked at what his data is clearly on set piece defending as well as set piece effectiveness on an offensive side of the pitch. But it'd be interesting to see if he has that in his locker. If he does, then great. Maybe that gives us a little bit of an opportunity to take advantage of that.
I think so. You just jump in. Sorry, very quickly. I think the whole set piece thing it goes back to the same thing you were saying earlier about the shooting, the shot conversion. It's kind of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy when you're in those situations and your confidence is low. You think, oh God, can't f this up, and then you just you put so much pressure on yourself, and you do. And I think you could see it, like you said last night, with Hutchinson going over to taking corner. At the back of his mind is thinking, please, make sure I don't do this again.
Yeah.
And he does it again. And it's the same with Callum, like, when he's got the chances and he's like, oh. And the other one I want to point out last night was Gibbs White, when he's running through the middle, he chooses to pass it to Callum. He's just thinking, just hit it, man. Just put it away. And it's that whole patting the buck a little bit. The confidence isn't there, and it becomes this self-fulfilling thing that you start to lose belief in your own ability. You've got the ability, but you just lose that instinct to be able to put your skills into action.
Yeah, 19 out of the 35 shots were from outside the 18 box.
Yeah, it was too much.
It's just mental.
The other thing that I will put into the mix is I'm disappointed that the influence of Wone and Stone doesn't seem really to be what we perhaps thought it would. I mean, Dyche is carrying the can because he's the gaffer. The buck stops with him. But, for two players in Stone and Wone that played under Brian Clough and played a certain way and so on, you would have thought that their style would have been influenced heavily by him and by that. And Sean Dyche as well to a certain degree. And it just doesn't really seem to be the case. So look, they have to carry blame as well. But the other thing is that we've also got to take into consideration, in fairness, is that we have had some injuries as well. I mean, Aina being out for a period of time, Wood being out still and probably not coming back. Murillo, that's a loss. Matt Sells, 3-Star Red saying any news when Matt Sells will be back. Looks like he's going to be out. I mean, when Sean Dyche says, well, it won't be days, that to me means that's months. He's already had a groin injury this season. I liked Ortega last night. He didn't have very much to do. I mean, let's face it, Wolves were dreadful. Wolves were absolutely appalling, but they nearly chuffing won it at the end. I know that all he had to do was stand up, but he did stand up, Ortega, and he saved the shot. Was it Mane? Was that who was it that shot it? And actually I thought he was solid and did quite well. So big tick. But again, Sean Dyche, guys, his post-match interview, I know he's trying to put positives on it. I know. But when he says, it's another clean sheet. It's another clean sheet. That's a positive. It's like, damn right, it's a clean sheet. They were terrible. They are terrible.
I was like, what did you watch?
Terrible.
We've got the
terrible.
We've got it's only Villa that conceded more than us. Conceded less than us in the last 6 Premier League games. So whoever's coming in's got a solid base to start from.
But I know your tongue is well and truly in your cheek, and everyone who knows Paul on X knows that he's putting things out there for everyone to kind of implode on, and I love it. It just felt to me, guys, and it always has felt to me, and I think Dyche probably values a clean sheet, maybe even more than 3 points. I mean, that's probably a daft thing to say. Obviously, he wants 3 points, but it just goes to show that his mentality is built on clean sheets and keeping it tight at the back. When in fact last night it needed endeavour. It needed not even that much risk. It needed someone to step forward and say, you know what, take off Sangare or take off, somebody that's kind of sitting in a bit more. I mean, people are calling out maybe Dominguez's energy could have come on. You talked about McAtee, Richard. Ndoye come on. He just looks like.
Well, that wasn't even. I didn't understand that. Why? He doesn't have the creativity that Callum has, and you bring him on, like that's going to suddenly change things or unlock something. That part was like, I get the like for like sometimes isn't a very effective way of doing it because it's just I like Ndoye probably more than most, but at the same time I was like, he didn't offer anything more than Callum does. He's not better on the ball than Callum is. It's just bizarre. Sorry, Greg, to cut you off.
I didn't notice this. Adam's talking about Wone and Stone not being in the dugout last night, suggesting that something had gone off before the match. I'll be honest with you, that's the first I've noticed or
really.
I didn't even it didn't even come across my radar that's the case. If that is true, then that is interesting. Okay, guys, we are nearly out of time, but I want to talk about not so much last night's game. We've done that. We know about everything to do with that. Sean Dyche has been sacked. He's no longer the Nottingham Forest manager. We have to look forwards now. We have got 13 points, I think, to gain in 12. Is it 12 matches left now? Is that right?
Yep.
So 12 matches, 13 points, 3 wins and a couple of draws or thereabouts. 4 wins would be lovely. We talked about where they're coming from before. We won't do that again. But Richard, I mean, thinking about the table, and I haven't got it to put on, but we know West Ham are 3 points behind us. We know, again, Paul articulated it well when he said, look, as much as their form's been better, they haven't really managed to gain any ground on us, or bar maybe a point in that run. So, we've kind of been matching them over the period of time. So there are positives to be taken into the next run of games. We play Liverpool a week on Sunday, following the Fenerbahce game. West Ham, I haven't got their fixture. I think it's Bournemouth, isn't it? Bournemouth at home.
They've got, yeah.
Come on in, Richard. Are Forest getting relegated? That's the question.
No.
And
No, I said it.
All your thoughts.
But I told you earlier, I think by virtue of what you just said, we've got enough matches left where there's opportunity. We basically have to average roughly a point per game. So I don't think we're asking Pereira or whomever it is. Maybe it's Paul Morley. That's what we're all hoping for. I think that's why I say the mountain to climb isn't as steep as people think. And so it'll be interesting to hear what Marinakis, if he ever articulates it after the season's concluded, as to what went into the decision-making and thought process and what he talked about with the players and all that. I'm sure we won't get all the details, but that's why I don't think it'll happen, because I think there's enough quality on this team to be successful. Because a large portion of the team is still intact that was there last season. I think they understand how to win matches. They've been struggling, and like I told you, sometimes when you're in a situation that you just don't connect with what the leadership is that's there guiding you through this process, it is hard sometimes to get that motivation. I think there was even discussions in Colomos's article about they were getting run into the ground so much that they were in the next match they were exhausted. And I'm going to tell you, I would not be shocked if that's true, because you could see there was just certain matches like Leeds, for example, where it was just off. Like they just it didn't look like the same kind of effort we've seen in other situations. And it's just like, what is the differentiating factor between these things? It's like, how are we going from here to here? And I mean, Paul's right. He's articulated it beautifully about the inconsistency and how that's been going on for a long time. So maybe it's not just a Dyche problem, even in that sense, but it definitely felt like they just didn't operate at the same level. And some players just won't be an 8 out of 10 every match, right? Like even Anderson on occasion won't, even Nico on occasion won't. But it definitely felt like there was something off, and so I think that's why I'm confident that they'll recenter, and they'll get someone in who I think can do the man management and put their arms around them and help them feel positive and confident again, and utilize the tools that we have and these players that we have to maximize their ability to succeed. So that's what I hope. But I think it's just simply a maths, I think, as they say in the UK instead of math in the US. I think it's a maths problem. I think you look at the points that are needed, and I just don't think it's that overwhelming.
Yeah, because it's mathematics, not mathematic. That's why it's maths. There we go. Some are saying Brighton, Richard's saying, and one or two others, Brighton are the surprise package. You've arrived from nowhere to the edge of a relegation battle. They're on 31 points. Palace capitulated last night, Paul. I mean, Burnley got themselves a nice win. Strand Larsen bagged 2 goals for Palace, but they were pegged back to lose 3-2. So they're on 32.
Yeah. Spurs Brighton are down there.
31. And then we go to Leeds on 30 points. Spurs on 29. I mean, the win last night would have taken us level with Spurs, and that's why it sticks in the throat. Forest on 27, West Ham on 24. I've been trying to look above us, Paul, more than below us, but I'm now into the kind of zone where I'm more looking below us. And as I've said, I think we're going to get relegated. What are your thoughts on relegation now, Paul?
I think I am less certain today than I was yesterday about staying up. I think this decision, I think we need to see what happens with who comes in and give it a couple of games before we saw almost whether we recalibrate our thinking or not. But I'm feeling a little bit more nervous than I was yesterday. But I'll give you some reasons for optimism, which I think is, if you think about, Richard sort of alluded to it there, that there's number of, obviously, clearly there's a huge chunk of the squad that did well last season. There's still a significant chunk of the squad that were there the season before, that stayed up and have been in a relegation battle before. And then you've got the likes of Morgan, Nico, Yatesy, Taiwo, whether we see him again or not. But those four, they did it under Cooper as well. So we've got experience within the squad of being in this situation and you know, managing ourselves away from it, which is I think a big thing, particularly if you've got, and this is where we're going to look to Morgan, I think, a lot over the next 12 weeks or 12 games, or whatever it is. He's our leader. Him and Yatesy, who've both been there twice before and come through it. So they're the guys that are going to need to take the lead and bring the rest of the squad with them. So that they are positive reasons to think that we can stay up. The negative side is, I think, as you alluded to, you know, teams who change managers this late in the season often very, very rarely improve. So I looked at some stats since 2020. So this decade, there's been 8 managerial changes by teams in the bottom 6 in February and beyond. Now Palace did it with Glasner, although they were 15th, so you could argue they were not in the same sort of predicament as we were, and they went from 15th to 10th. So they obviously survived. The other one that survived was Leeds in the year we got promoted. So in 21-22, they brought in Jesse Marsh, and they actually went from 16th to 17th. So they went down a place, but they still stayed up. And I think, if I'm right in thinking, out of all those 8 that came in at this stage of the season, Glasner's the only one who improved the team's position. So it's incredibly difficult to come in at this stage and make significant strides up the table, but it's not unheard of to sort of hold position. So, you know, I think by making the change outside of the relegation zone, probably it gives us a better chance of staying up than doing it inside the relegation zone. And just a final point on that I'll make when you talk about looking down is that we also have to remember, if West Ham do catch us and go ahead of us by a point, let's say in the next 2 games, the season doesn't suddenly finish there. Just because we might go into the bottom 3 doesn't automatically relegate us. And I think people have got into that mindset that, oh Christ, West Ham catches. And as soon as West Ham catches, that's it, we're done. But we know from our own experience, again, going back to that first season back in the Premier League, I think, if I'm not mistaken, we spent something like 32 or 33 weeks of that season in the bottom 3. But obviously we ended up finishing 16th. So, you know, if we were in the bottom 3 with 2 games to go, 1 game to go, Leeds are playing West Ham on the last game of the season. That's almost another thing to bear in mind, that those 2 play each other on the final day. So if we're in a 3-way mix between the 3 of us, at least 1 or maybe 2 of them is both going to drop points on that last day of the season.
Let's hope that they don't need a point each to survive.
Let's hope they play out that sort of Germany-Austria type game from the 1982 World Cup. Yeah, let's hope not. What I mean is, you know, so there's it can go to. I desperately hope it doesn't go to the last game of the season. But if it does, then that's something we need to bear in mind. So, putting all those things in the mix. Look, I think you just got to look at the trying to take the emotion out of it. At the minute, we're in the place where we need to finish. We just got to match. Or again, we can give away 2, maybe even 3 points to get to against West Ham because of the goal difference thing over the course of the next 12 weeks to still stay up. So from that reason, I think the guys on Forest Focus talked about this relegation terror scale the other week from 0 to 10. I think I was probably a 2.5 or a 3 yesterday. I think I'm probably maybe a 4.5 or a 5 today. But that still means that we're just about on the right side of the line, I think.
Okay, we're just about out of time. We are, in fact, out of time. So we will end things there. Just to say that it's FA Cup weekend. So we get a free weekend to lick our wounds a little bit. And then when the Premier League resumes, we will, of course, be hosting Liverpool at the City Ground. Leeds travel to Aston Villa. West Ham will host Bournemouth. Spurs will host Arsenal. So still plenty to play for. Peter says in the comments, well, Greg, you literally said you would take 17th in the Europa win. He asked for 7th. Maybe I'm going to get my wish. You didn't think what happens on the way to 17th. Look, of course I'll take 17th in the Europa. Well, the other thing as well, if we win the Europa League, do we have to carve it up into 3 pieces and pass a little bit to Ange?
Ange will take that.
You know, they'll get like a little, maybe like Ange gets an arm or something, or one of the handles, and so on. Thank you so much for being with us. Go ahead and hit like and subscribe, folks. Please hit like and subscribe. Join us on all your socials. I did a live earlier on TikTok. I had itchy fingers and itchy feet. So about an hour and a half before, I thought I'd go out live on TikTok and just promote that we're coming on. And it was an interesting 10 minutes. I was kind of talking to myself, not really sure. I saw lots of people joining. So you can go and find us on TikTok, and maybe I'll do another live at some point. But in the meantime, guys, I'm on the floor a little bit, as you can tell. I try to be balanced, but sometimes I'm extremely chirpy and other times I'm extremely low. On the terror scale, I've gone from being pretty certain that we won't get relegated to now being pretty certain that we will get relegated. So I'm kind of like all or nothing, hot or cold. There's no lukewarm with me at the moment. I hope that I am wrong, and if Forest survive, then I will be appearing on Talking Reds naked to host an episode.
No, you won't.
Live from
Don't sanction that. Don't want to see it.
You've heard it here first. In the meantime, guys, keep your chins up. Some of us have got more than one. So we'll see you soon. Take care.
Come join Greg and Richard right here on Talking Reds.